And welcome to Fanalysis, where we combine the analytics of fantasy football with the metrics of sports betting to find you the sharpest angles. I'm Steve Overmyer, and I'm joined by sports handicapper that you can find on Twitter as Old Man Who Bets, Geoff Sheasby. Good to see you once again, Geoff. And listen, the first week is always tricky in the NFL, but for the second week, it's a chance for maybe public overreactions. Let's start things off with the Rams and the Eagles. The Rams are coming off of a statement game and their big win over the Cowboys, while the Eagles blew a 17-point lead to Washington. Right now, the Eagles are 1.5 favorites. Is that a value play or a trap?
You know, when you think about it, it's certainly a strong line for the Eagles. It's very much a trap for the Rams. This line has been all over the place. It opened at -3.5 in favor of the Eagles. It's gotten as far as +1.5 for the Eagles. I was seeing it at -1 while coming up with this analysis. So I think, quite frankly, this is the trap of the year. And I get it. You know, you got a West Coast team coming to the East Coast for an early game. An interesting trend here from 2003 to 2012, the West Coast teams making that trip for early games only covered at about a 41% clip. Vegas, of course, hates giving out free money, and that's just about as close to free money as you can get. They did adjust those lines since 2013 on. It's been a little bit closer to 500, 45, 34, and 3. So that's interesting, right? But when we get into the game here, you know, you've got a Philly team that absolutely should be motivated. An incredibly bad loss to the Washington football team. And then they were up 17-0, an epic blown lead. They couldn't score in the second half. All the wheels came off. So now you're looking at this line. You know, again, you said it's statement win for the Rams, and now they're underdogs to a team that just lost to one of the worst teams in football for the last 4 years. That is super, super interesting. But, you know, at the end of the day, I think I'm going to side with Joe Public. I like the Rams. So go ahead, Steve.
I was going to say, you like the Rams on this one. I wonder if a lot of this has to do with, if we dive down into the weeds, we look into the trenches, Aaron Donald is impossible to block on any given week, but now you're looking at an Eagles team that has offensive line issues too.
Yeah, absolutely. And this Eagles team's allowed eight sacks last week, again, against not Aaron Donald. So, you know, I think this is a Rams team that obviously, you know, had a Super Bowl run a couple years ago. They had a bit of a Super Bowl hangover last year, a bit of a down year. But I loved what I saw against this Cowboys team. Their 20th ranked defense right now in terms of defensive efficiency should increase. Last year, they were 9th in defense. So that I think that, you know, looking at kind of year over year, that should take that small sample size of 1 week and regress northern. And Philly, we look at this roster. They have 0 wide receivers even worth mentioning in this broadcast. They're banged up at running back. Wentz does Wentz things, which is flashes of brilliance, flashes of mediocrity. And again, that offensive line is a sieve. So, you know, we got the Philly defense that looks fine. I don't think they're necessarily any better than that Cowboys defense, maybe a touch. But this is a Rams offense that is looking pretty well. You know, obviously you've got Goff at the helm with Kupp and Roberts. They've got 2 great tight ends in Higbee and Everett. A rotating backfield that looked great with Malcolm Brown leading the charge. Ultimately, Cam Akers should probably slot into that role. But I'm going to buy high on the Rams. I'm going to side with Joe Public in, you know, admittedly the trap line of the year, and I'm going to take the Rams at +1, at -1, at pretty much wherever it settles.
And one more note to kind of solidify this, if you will. Sean McVay has never lost an East Coast 1 p.m. start. He's a perfect 4-0 in those scenarios. So historically, you would even lean on the Rams side of things. All right, now to another game that you're going to be including this week. The Bucs have an 8.5-point spread to beat the Tampa Bay, or to beat in Tom Brady's home debut with the Panthers. Is Tampa's run defense built to help or built to hold down an elusive back like Christian McCaffrey?
Yeah, fantastic question. I think Carolina is a good place for us to start in this analysis, right? They looked good in week 1 against the Las Vegas Raiders. You know, Teddy made some great throws. CMC, to your point, obviously one of the best backs in the league. He did a really, really strong job. And even Robbie Anderson, our ex-Jet, balled out, you know, over 100 yards. Those are all very positive things and a huge improvement from last year. But this was going against an absolutely mediocre Raiders defense. They ranked 23rd in this year in defensive efficiency, 31st in the league last year. So if the Panthers didn't put up points and didn't do good things last week, I would have been far more concerned. So that brings us to the Bucs defense, right? To your point, can they stop Christian McCaffrey? They're first in the league against the rush last year. They're 3rd this year. And the Bucs defense looked pretty fierce against the high-octane Saints offense last week. You know, obviously they did allow some points, but less points than they usually do, and they still were tormented by interceptions. Brady threw a pick 6. He threw another bad ball with a miscommunication with Mike Evans. But nonetheless, I love to see Tom Brady here. He covers at a historic 59% cover rate over the course of his 17, 18 years in the league.
Wait, now you're talking historically, though, with Tom Brady. And Tom Brady in week 1 looked every bit of 43 years old. Is this just one of those things where the Brady hater in me is just eagerly anticipating his demise? Or is that demise coming sooner than we thought?
I think the Brady hater in you is really just rearing its ugly head. He's got a new offense.
Who says it's ugly?
Yeah, fine. It's a very handsome head, Steve. You're absolutely right. But so is Tom Brady. He's the most handsome guy in the league. He had a bit of a rough day. That's okay. We've got Bruce Arians already riding him to play better. He's got the best weapons again, as you already had. We talked about last week: Evans, Godwin, Gronk, Howard, Fournette, or Ronald Jones III, Scotty Miller, aka the new Julian Edelman, aka the new Wes Welker, and he gets to face the Carolina defense that just gave up 34 points to the Raiders. I mean, if there's ever a get-right spot, this is the one. And I love the public's, honestly, overreaction, the complete opposite of the first game, to Tampa Bay's woes and Carolina's upswings. Only 55% of the bets right now are on Tampa Bay. I think that should be closer to 70. This screams as one of those games that should have been an absolute public spot. I think people are too high on Carolina, too low on Tampa Bay. And I think the Bucs -9 cover relatively easily.
I'm glad that you brought up the public, because we really have to keep an eye on the public on the way that you can figure out where the sharpest angle is. And you don't expect this Titans-Jaguars game to be so popular with the public, but it's getting a lot of action. Heavy money has moved this line to the Titans favored by 8.5. Did that movement help you choose this game either way?
Not specifically, but I do think this is a prime overreaction, literally on both fronts, coming off of week 1. And the fact, to your point, that the public, 83% of bets are on Jacksonville right now is pure blasphemy, borderline comedy. I mean, we saw a Tennessee team that struggled on the road in Denver. Altitude, historically, a pretty tough place to play. And it honestly was an atrocious no cover. Gostkowski had his worst game since probably freshman year in high school, missing 3 field goals and an extra point, and they still only missed the cover by 1. They honestly should have covered. Tannehill missed up a wide open A.J. Brown on that final drive. That's neither here nor there. Enter Jacksonville, right? Of course, I love mustache madness of Gardner Minshew III. I mean, how can you not? But this team overachieved incredibly hard in week 1. He threw 19 for 20 for 173 yards and 3 TDs. That puts them right now as 4th in terms of the NFL offensive efficiency, 3rd in passing of offensive efficiency. And that's just not what this Jaguars team is, right? They played well. Steve, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, I mean, look, you saw Derrick Henry's numbers, 116 yards on 31 carries. He is an absolute workhorse, but the real question is, does he have to be that dominant against the Jaguars?
I don't think he has to be, but I think he will, and then some. We look at them versus the Colts last week. Marlon Mack, the Colts starting running back, went out after 4 carries. He was averaging 6 yards per carry. So the Jags get this win, and now the public loves them. The Colts were starting a new quarterback. They lost their starting running back, and they're a ground and pound team that threw the ball 46 times. That wasn't Colts football. So that's the outlier here. And now all of a sudden enter the Tennessee Titans. Again, an ugly game in Denver, missed all those kicks. Henry ran for 116 on 31 carries. I'd expect his workload to be equally as high, if not higher. And then you look at even their receivers. Corey Davis, remember that he was once again a receiver, and he's in a contract year, puts up over 100 yards. Love to see that. And honestly, physically, this receiving core is pretty beastly. Between Davis, A.J. Brown, and Jonnu Smith, he caught a pass, like a screen pass in the first quarter, and scampered for 25 yards. I was like, who's this slot receiver? Turns out it's like their 6'2", tight end. So they even have the Julian Edelman light, Adam Humphries, again, not quite a Scotty Miller, but really, really solid. But so I think unless lightning strikes twice, which would be Gostkowski missing another 4 kicks, and he's got an 87% career make rate, I think the Titans honestly absolutely cruise through this one.
Well, you know what? There's one thing that you got to keep in mind when you're facing the Titans. That is a big team. It is a physical team. You're going to get hurt playing against the Titans. They're not going to outrun you, but they just might run over you. Should be a good game to watch this week. The early weeks are really where the sharps can find some of those angles. Make sure you check out our segment on the Jets and the Giants leans as well. That's a look at his top plays of the week. For Geoff Sheasby, I'm Steve Overmyer. This is Fanalysis.